Travis Chappell is the founder of Guestio and host of Travis Makes Friends. He spent his career in sales and relationship building, starting in door-to-door work and now connecting creators with major platform opportunities. His core conviction is that people you know and the relationships you build are your actual competitive advantage. And he's built his entire business around making those connections easier. Today, we're going to talk about how relationships become leverage, why most people build them wrong, and what he's learned from interviewing hundreds of entrepreneurs and public figures. Travis, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Chrissy. Appreciate it.
The main thing that kind of got our conversation started was you were talking about a podcast host that came on and wasn't prepared. And he was like, well, what are we going to talk about? And you're like, anything. And so it was just a complete waste of an opportunity for that guy. I want to know, after you posted that, did he reach back out?
No. Yeah, I have no idea what ended up happening with that. Honestly, there was it's happened before, which is probably why I decided just to post about it this time, because I was just frustrated in the moment and was just like, I know people follow me for this type of stuff sometimes, so let me just throw this out there. Like, this is terrible, podcast etiquette here. Do not do this stuff. It's insane.
That's crazy. Yeah, I definitely always prepare. I'm rather curious as a person, though, so I'm always asking why questions and digging a little further. And I noticed in your background, so I mentioned in the intro that you started door to door. What on earth would make somebody go, you know what, door to door sounds great. Let me start with that.
Money is a great motivator, Chrissy. It was just when I was in college. And a buddy of mine started knocking for this solar company, and I remember it striking me as something that I wanted to do, because at the time I had a little landscaping business and I was just trying to make extra money in college, and my buddy that previous summer had worked 2 full-time jobs because he was paying for his way through school himself. So he worked 2 full-time jobs. So he was literally working 80 hours a week. We never saw him the whole summer. We were always trying to hang out. He couldn't hang out. He's working 80-hour work weeks. And when I was sitting with him and he showed me his paycheck from this solar gig, he was like, yeah, last week I worked 20 hours and this paycheck is bigger than when I was working 80 hours a week at my 2 jobs. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And didn't think I would go work somewhere for somebody else while I was in college, but let's try this thing out. So I tried door to door and was pretty good at it and started doing pretty well at it, and then figured out after I graduated college that I did not want to be in ministry, which is what I was getting my degree for. And so I did door to door out of just, essentially, it was the only thing I knew how to do that I knew could make better money than getting a desk job and reporting to some person who I didn't respect. And you know what I mean? I figured it was going to be a better gig than doing that. So I just went full time into door to door.
That's awesome. And, I guess that builds your skin thickness really quickly, because you literally get the door slammed in your face.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The rejection that you gain, the experience in rejection, I should say, is unlike any other form of sales, in my opinion, just because it's in person. Like, the only one that would be sort of comparable would be cold calling. It's just that cold calling feels a little bit different. When somebody hangs up the phone on you, it feels less personal than when somebody slams a door in your face. But both of them are difficult. But yeah, it is a baptism by fire in terms of rejection.
Yeah, my husband's old school, and he still does cold calls, meaning like in-person sales. And literally we'll just go to somebody's company and yeah, rejection doesn't bother him now either. So it takes a special kind of person to be able to do that. I don't think I could. And it's funny, my daughter, so I have the twins who are 27, and one of them, she was in music starting at the age of 12. And now one of her jobs, she pays for her music habit with commercial real estate. And, she really attributes her confidence to having been on stage since she was 12 and getting rejected over and over and over. And she's like, nothing.
Oh, totally. I have a few actor friends, comedian friends, and I tell them that we've talked about this on podcast episodes where I preface it by saying, like, I'm a door-to-door sales guy. Pretty much nobody on the planet understands rejection as much as door-to-door salespeople, except for maybe actors and actresses. Like that is potentially like the other field where it's like, because that one feels to me anyway, I feel like that would feel really personal. It would be more difficult almost to overcome those hits of rejection, because it is essentially a rejection of you as a person. And obviously you can't take it personally because they're just trying to fill a role and they didn't feel like you filled that role and somebody else did. So it's not actually a rejection of you. It's a rejection of your projection of the character that you're trying to play. But yeah, like I said, I feel like I could understand how that would be, that would take its mental toll.
Yeah, for sure. And I see the guitar behind you. Do you play?
I play a little bit. Yeah. I play around is more probably the better way to say it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I don't even play around. I can't. I don't know where my daughter got her instrumental talent from. I can sing, so she did get that from me. But the instruments, no. But you said a second ago, celebrity friends. You have interviewed some insanely big names. How did all of that start to come about?
I suppose with a realization that anybody on the planet is alive is somebody who you can get in touch with. And I sort of internalized that really early on. I don't know what exactly it was. I think it was just sort of the logic part of my brain took over at some point and was just like, I mean, because I would write a name down on my like dream list of like, I would love to have these people on. This is when I was first starting my show back almost 9 years ago. And I wrote down a few names and I was just in my head immediately was just like, I don't know why I'm writing this. This is impossible. These people are like, there's nothing that I can do. I don't know anybody in this world at all. There's no path that I can see, and then I don't know what it was. I just kind of stopped allowing myself to think that and started thinking like, yeah, but if it were possible, what would it look like? Like, what would it take? What would that entail? Because any of those things are possible. You just have to figure out what it would take to get there and then ask yourself the question, am I willing to do the work to get there? And if the answer, by the way, the answer could be no. And a lot of times is probably going to be a no, but that just gives you clarity that maybe this path isn't the path for you. Because if the work doesn't excite you, then the journey is going to be really difficult and the obstacles are going to be almost impossible to overcome. So it's an indicator that you're probably doing something incorrectly. But if you look at that and go, yeah, that work is worth it to me, then you're probably on the right track. And so it was just sort of this like, you can get in touch with anybody if you try hard enough. You know what I mean? Like you can get, and by the way, there's been plenty of people who I've had on my show who I've reached out to once or twice, and then that was it. Like I just didn't care enough about getting that person on to do the volume of effort that I know is required to go get some of the other people that I've had on. So, you win some, you lose some, and again, face a lot of rejection.
Yeah, 100%. I saw that you interviewed Donald Miller, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. He seems like he would be fun. I mean, so he actually trained me on StoryBrand back in 2019, and
Okay.
but I didn't get to interview him on my podcast, so that's really cool. But
Yeah, he's great. He's great. I had him on towards the beginning of the release of that book, like maybe circa 2018 or something like that. Yeah, I want to say 2018. And that was just like a virtual, Zoom interview. So it was just a kind of quick hit. But then, yeah, I flew out to Ramsey HQ and interviewed a few Ramsey personalities. And he happened to be there interviewing Dave, or Dave was interviewing him or something like that. He was on Ramsey campus. And so Ramsey was kind enough to lend me one of their studios to sit down and have a 75-minute conversation with him in person. Amazing dude. I really enjoyed talking to him. Brilliant writer. Obviously has a major insights into the StoryBrand framework and things like that. So yeah, really, really interesting guy.
nice. And I know I've seen on some of your videos in the past that you kind of go back and forth on how you describe your upbringing. And I too had a pretty strict Christian upbringing, and went to a parochial school, had to take New Testament, Old Testament, go to chapel every Wednesday, of course. And what was it like for you when you decided, yeah, I don't want ministry as my career?
Difficult, lonely. confusing. Yeah, it was just it was a strange time. You know what I mean? I was 21. I'd graduated from college. I graduated from college, moved away from my hometown for the first time, and got married all within a 6-month period of time. So it was just like huge life change after huge life change after huge life change. And I found myself in a position where I just felt like I was not, bought in. I wasn't fully sold on the mission, and I wasn't fully sold on the idea of continuing to go in that direction. And simultaneously, because I had that experience of going door to door in college and sort of getting a taste of business and sales and entrepreneurship to a certain degree, of course. But I was preparing speeches for my team, and I was recruiting and training sales reps, and I was kind of on that grind, and I actually really enjoyed that more than I enjoyed any of like the internships or anything that I did at churches while I was in college. And so it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks one day that it was like, oh wow, I am interning at this church on the weekends, but all I'm thinking about the whole time I'm doing this is how excited I am to get back to school so that I can work at my job, a job that I'm supposed to be quitting in 5 months when I graduate, to do the thing that I don't like doing on the weekends now. You know what I mean? And it was like, so I'm going to like increase the volume of hours of the thing that I don't like and decrease the volume of hours on the thing that I do like. That doesn't seem like a recipe for happiness or success, and then I just eventually had this come to Jesus moment, or I guess, go away from Jesus moment, so to speak, where I just realized one day that, and I know this is super obvious, but you know how sometimes things hit you in a certain way and you can internalize them, conceptualize them better. I just realized one day, like, I'm the only person that's got to wake up every single day and spend every second of that day with me. All of the people that I was making decisions for, I was probably going to see them 5 to 8 days a year. You know what I mean? So it was like, I'm going to live the rest of my year so that when I see these like authority figures and people I've grown to love and respect over the course of my childhood, these like sort of personal heroes of mine, when I see them, they'll be proud of me. And I'm going to live 358 days a year doing something I don't want to do so that those 7 days a year that I see them, they'll be happy. Like, that seems like a recipe that only makes them happy and not one that makes me happy. And they're only thinking about me for 5 minutes during one of those days that I'm there. You know what I mean? Like, they're not thinking about me every day. That's just not happening. So it's like, I have to start making decisions based on what I think is going to be best for me, not based on what everybody else thinks is going to be best for me. And so I think I feel lucky that I was able to have that realization as a 21, 22-year-old instead of a 45-year-old. Because I think a lot of people, and it's not even just talking about growing up like a fundamentalist Baptist, bubble that I grew up in. It's really any cultural pressures, any societal pressures, from whether that's from your parents, from your teachers, from your coaches. You're when you're a kid, you have this unbridled connection with what you want. And then as you grow up, you get conditioned by society, by movies, by culture, by music, by teachers, by all of the inputs and authority figures in your life. And so you sort of lose touch with that as you go along, and you replace that with ideals of life that other people have installed in you and told you are ideal. Then you grow up. I think a lot of people just mindlessly pursue those ideals without giving any thought to whether or not it's an ideal they'd like to aspire to. And I think that is sort of, I think the cause of a lot of these like crises, midlife crisis and quarter life crisis, whatever life crisis that people go through, is they just sort of realize, like, man, I'm not actually connected to the thing that I do. And I think that causes a lot of issues along the way. So I was lucky enough to figure that out earlier on.
Yeah, that's amazing, because you're right. A lot of people, it's, they're 45, 50 years old and they're like, wait, this sucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's amazing. I've always known that I was not built for corporate. So thankfully, that is something I knew early on, that I just wasn't going to be able to do the grind. And I remember my dad took me to Take Your Daughter to Work Day. Now I think it's called Take Youths to Work Day or something, but it was called Take Your Daughter to Work Day back then. And he worked at a large oil and gas company. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is so boring. Everybody's in their cubicles. They all just look like they're just walking away, waiting for 5 o'clock. And
Yeah.
I knew I couldn't do it. But, he stuck with it. He was able to retire at a really early age. So,
Yeah. And I think for that generation, there was they had a different MO, and some, it made a little bit of sense to sacrifice personal autonomy for certainty at a certain time in American history. I just feel like I feel like the trade-off currently is not worth it, because there's no loyalty the other direction like there used to be. And even back then, I know that there's some examples where that was not the case, but you could, at that time, graduate from college or not graduate from college and just start working and be at the same company for 40 years, and then have a great pension, a great retirement, you know what I mean? Have a fulfilling career. And yeah, like I said, you don't have personal autonomy and you got to sacrifice some things. But, I think for a generation or so, that was probably a worthy decision. I don't think that's the case anymore. So, I think there's a lot more people that are going to be pursuing alternative paths anymore.
Yeah, I definitely did that myself. And, networking became a huge thing that I did at the very beginning. And I'm an introvert. So it was, or I guess there's now a new one. And there's another one, Omnivert or something like that. I don't remember that. I just saw that recently. But going into crowds and just walking up to somebody definitely is out of my comfort zone. But I've built that muscle over the years. And how did you transition from your door to door to then networking and doing this? I mean, networking is like your thing.
Yeah, I sort of accidented my way into it because I knew I wanted to start a podcast. I finally got some clarity when I was trying to figure out a new path forward, because it was basically like I had some success in door to door early on and then realized I didn't want to do that either. Like I was making some good money and I had some freedom and flexibility. I just didn't want, I looked around at the people who were older than me working at that place and was just like, I don't want that. And not to say that it's a bad thing. I have plenty of friends that have made, sometimes I wish I could have stayed in that space, because I have some friends who make a killing in door to door and do really well for themselves and built amazing lives around that industry. It just wasn't what I wanted to do forever. So, I started my podcast because I started listening to a bunch of podcasts and I just trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. Took this free podcast course from a guy named John Lee Dumas, who at the time was like the #1 entrepreneurial podcaster in existence. And so I started listening to his show a bunch, and I took his free podcast course and figured out, I think I'm going to start a podcast. And the very first lesson that I learned when I was diving down that rabbit hole is, well, you got to pick a niche. You got to niche down. The riches are in the niches and all this stuff. And I was like, well, what am I good at? And the answer was sales. And I was like, I can do sales. I'm pretty good at selling stuff. So why don't I start a podcast on sales? So I go to Apple Podcasts, or at the time it was iTunes. I go to iTunes and I search and I see like 50 sales podcasts. I was like, well, clearly there's a lot of people talking about this. It's going to be more difficult for me as a 24-year-old without a lot of experience to cut through the noise and earn market share, listener share, and take that away from people like, Zig Ziglar or Grant Cardone or all these massive sales trainers in that space. Also, I was trying to get away from door-to-door sales. So because I was like, I could start one on door-to-door sales because there wasn't one that existed at that time. But I was like, that doesn't make any sense. It's just going to further drag me into the hole that I'm trying to leave. And so I thought about it a little bit more and I was like, why was I good at selling for the most part? Like when I got into a new place? And the answer was that I always went to the person who was doing the best, and I got around them as much as I possibly physically could. And I learned as much from them as I possibly could in as short of a period of time as possible. And I increased the volume of reps in that period of time so that I could outlearn everybody else in a much, much shorter time frame. And so I was like, that's kind of networking, right? That's like surrounding yourself with people who are way better than you. And then you're going to inevitably get that much better because you're around those types of people, and they just, the just getting the crumbs. It's not even all the times like the meat that they give you. It's the crumbs. It's the way that they talk about things, the way that they speak about goals, the way that they talk about their action steps or their plan. It's like you pick up things being around those types of people. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe that's something. So I go to iTunes and I search networking and I couldn't find anything. So I was like, okay, well, there's clearly like a blue ocean here. Let me jump into that space. But at the time I was terrible at it. I didn't have any experience. I never gone to an event in my life, like leading up to starting a show on networking. And so it was sort of like a personal discovery and also leaving the world that I grew up in, because my entire life existed on a 40-acre campus from the time that I was 3 until the time that I was 22. When I was 23, 24, I was essentially starting from scratch, because when I left that world, like just, some people some people definitely didn't want me to be successful, but there was probably just a majority of people who were just kind of like, okay, well, good luck. And we're just not going to do much for you anymore, just because our worlds don't collide. You know what I mean? And so I had to start my network from scratch and was like, okay, well, this seems like a pretty good way to learn how to do it better myself, is just to ask people who are good at it. So my first like 200 episodes, I didn't do anything solo. It was always, I did interviews exclusively, because I was just like, if somebody is going to learn networking from me, it's not going to be from me. It's going to be from the people that I talk to. And I just have to get better at asking them questions. And so, it sort of was like a personal discovery process. It wasn't me coming into it with like, I'm the expert, everybody listen to me. It was more like, let me learn from all these people who've done really well with this and see what I can do with the lessons and takeaways that I get from them and how I can apply that to my own stuff. And, that was the MO from the beginning.
Nice. You said like the little nuggets or the little crumbs rather than the nuggets. And I remember this really small thing that somebody told me once, and it was to put the name tag on your right side, because when you shake their hands, your shoulder is, going toward them. And I always thought, I never really thought of that. But it's, those little bitty things that really make a difference. And then I did get to learn a lot more, because I ghost wrote a book on network marketing. So that was super helpful for me early in my career.
Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, I definitely, I see some people on LinkedIn sometimes, and I think, okay, yeah, you're the person that would show up to a networking event and just shove your business card in my face.
Yeah, I call him Networking Ned.
Networking Ned.
Yeah, that was the persona that I identified early on, as just like the person you hate to see coming at the networking event. And it was just like, don't be this person. Don't be people treat networking like it's an in-person cold calling opportunity, and that's a misread on the situation. And now, if to be fair to them, because some of those people are so used to doing that, they're typically extroverted, which means that they're really good at going a mile wide and an inch deep. Introverts, I'm introverted by nature as well, for the most part. And I think, it's a really nuanced discussion of whether or not you're an introvert or extrovert. The best definition I ever heard is like, do you gain energy from being with people, or does that zap your energy with new people? And so I always looked at it as like, well, I'm mostly introverted, but in some contexts I can make myself be extroverted, but it's just because I know that there's some sort of like societal reward for doing it like that. So it's a nuanced conversation, but I tend to find myself to be more introverted. And all that being said, is introverts are, I think, really good at relationships counterintuitively, because introverts are really good at going in a mile deep and an inch wide, and extroverts are the opposite. And so this networking Ned type character looks at their extroverted personality type as like this major advantage in networking situations, but only to the degree that they use it as an in-person cold calling opportunity. And like I was saying earlier, it works. Like if you shake enough hands, you will be able to do some business. You know what I mean? The problem with it is that you are filling your network with a bunch of people who are used to doing business like that. And typically those people tend to have more of a taker reciprocity style rather than a giver reciprocity style. And they're going to be very transactional relationships. And so the problem with it is that it's a continuous hamster wheel of making new connections, because you're constantly burning through relationships and burning through hands, for lack of a better term. So if you're burning through all these people, you have to constantly be doing this thing. That's why you see, the insurance salesperson who's made 120 grand a year for the last 25 years, and they still show up to the same networking meetings, and they still go to the Chamber of Commerce, and they still go to the BNI group, and they still, you know what I mean? It's like their business has never like outgrown their own capacity to be able to learn how to build better relationships. They're not getting a bunch of referrals. They don't have a bunch of referral partners. They don't, they're not actively plugged into a network full of givers. And so in my mind, it's more like this ultra high high volume, really shallow relationship building is just not conducive for long-term growth and long-term success. You're going to see better results by actually actively building real, genuine relationships and friendships with people, rather than just being a collector of business cards or contact information.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. I mean, I definitely can go deeper. I often sometimes wonder if I'm too deep for, like, do I go too deep for some people? Are they like, okay, let's bring it up a little bit. You're going too deep. But how does somebody balance that? Because, especially in my generation, we were taught, your professional side is separate from your personal side. And, I'm starting to see, well, I don't really like separating those two. And, what is your advice for somebody in trying to bring the whole human into networking?
Yeah, I think there is a difference between your professional side and your personal side, but there's not a difference in how the relationship is built. So I have several friends of mine who I've known essentially my whole life. They're not in business. They're not the entrepreneurial types, they're like prison guards and firefighters and cops and just like random jobs in society. And those are some of my closest friends to this day. And I find a lot of value in engaging in those friendships. But I'm probably not going to get business from them. You know what I mean? But the difference is that what I've learned over the years is that the way that you form those types of interpersonal friendships is the same exact way that you do it in a professional context. And that's where I think the disconnect is for most people, is that they treat they treat making friends differently than they do networking. They're two different activities in their mind. So like if they're making if they're going out to a bar and they're going out with a friend of theirs, and then that friend is bringing two of their coworkers, and you know what I mean? And you're meeting people for the first time, but you're hanging out at a bar, you're playing some pool, or you're throwing some darts over a few beers, and you're just asking questions, getting to know each other, building friendships. They look at that as like, okay, that's over here in this corner. And then over here in this corner, we have professional networking, in which case I need to have a, button up and a tie. I need to have my name tag. I got to have 100 hot off the press business cards in my pocket. I got to memorize my 30-second elevator pitch, and I got to meet as many people as I possibly can, collect as many business cards as I possibly can, follow up with them tomorrow, see if we can jump on a call and get business from them. You know what I mean? Like they treat the two activities as completely separate things and two wildly different skill sets, when I think that more people would benefit from doing the friend making thing just in a professional context. And understand that not all professional relationships and friendships are going to become close friends, and they shouldn't. You only have a limited capacity for the volume of people that can be really, really close to you in your life. It's probably 3 to 5. You know what I mean? So if you have 12,000 connections on LinkedIn, they're obviously not going to be your close personal friends, but they can be professional friends. And I think that's a better way of looking at it than saying like, oh, this over here, this is my network, and this over here, these are my friends. It's like, okay, well, I have plenty of friends that are in business, but I know that those aren't the friends that I'm going to call at midnight when I'm having an issue with my kid, or like I got a bad medical diagnosis and I'm tripping out. And so you know what I mean? Like those aren't going to be the people who are like there for me in the moments of life that I really need the people around me to be there. And if you treat them like that, then you're probably going to be sorely disappointed in those relationships. So it's good to think about them as separate things, but without making that separation so distinct that it prompts you to to go about the activity in a wildly different way, where one of them becomes more self-serving and the other one becomes more others serving. Both of them should be others serving. Both of them should be giving. Both of them should be based in generosity and adding value to the other people. All relationships are an exchange of value, whether it's a close personal friendship and the value is just in the friendship itself, or it's a business contact or professional relationship where the value is in mutual exchange of business, or continuing to see the same faces at the same types of business conferences that you go to 2 or 3 times a year. Both are really important. But conflating the but having a difference between the way that they're done, I think, is the problem.
I love that. And you're right. Just leading with service, if you just start there, that's what makes all the difference. I have this year shifted to a more relational, conversation focused way of business development, meaning I'm just going to have conversations and detach from the outcome of any of them, whether that leads to business now, later, never, whatever. I'm just going to keep having conversations. And it's been really freeing to not have to, rely on, okay, this discovery call better turn it into a sale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're two set. Like I said, those like prospecting and making friends in business are two different activities. You know what I'm saying? Like making friends is something over here, and then making friends in business is something over here, and these are done very similarly. Prospecting is a different activity than the other ones. Like that's when you can get into the cold calling and the cold DMing and then door knocking and all those types of things, because cold calling has its place. Prospecting has its place. If you want a good business, you have to generate leads. You have to prospect. Like that's a part of the deal. It's just that when you start mixing the two of those together, that's when you start really, I think, turning a lot of people off, because you present yourself as though you are in a friend-making context, and then you hit them with a pitch out of nowhere, and it's like, it feels gross. That's why people feel like when they're done networking, they got to go take a shower. You know what I mean? It just feels. Yeah. And like my thing is, like, you got to follow that intuition sometimes. If like it feels gross, then you're probably doing it wrong. You know what I mean? It shouldn't feel like that. It should feel like you're just making friends. It just in a different context.
You made me think of, this was a couple of years ago, but one of our clients was on a podcast, and despite all the prep work we had done, the questions that the host had, all this stuff, he turned it into where he was trying to coach her and sell her his coaching.
Yep. Yeah, it's maddening when I see people do that, because it's like I said, it's a misunderstanding of what the context of the situation is. It is not your job to sell somebody something because they agreed to be on your show. Now, will it open doors? Yes. Will it lead to business? Yes. But you can't use that as your prospecting, and if you're going to use it as that, be upfront about that. Like, this is how we generate business for our business. If you come on the show, we are going to be actively talking about the things in your business that we can improve. And if there's a way for us to work together at the end of this, then I'd love to talk about that once we're done with the conversation. If you set it up like that, fine, because then people know what they're coming into. But when you set it up like this, like, oh my gosh, Chrissy, like, I love what you're working on. I love that you did X, Y, Z. I'd love to talk to you about it on my show. Let's have a conversation. You're like, okay, great, let's do it. And then we jump on, and then I turn that conversation into an opportunity to sell you something. Then that's when it starts being real gross really soon.
Yeah. And you're right. I've been on one of those where they told me, like, beforehand that they were going to be pitching me. And I was like, that's fine. I'm still down for the conversation. Maybe we will work together, maybe not. And yeah, there was no ick factor about it at all. It was fine. So
yep. Just
I'm glad
whatever
you brought that
presenting. Yeah. Whatever you're presenting as the purpose or the context of the call, do that. You know what I mean? And don't take advantage of people. I'll even have people at the end of a conversation who'll be like, oh, you mentioned something about, whatever, podcast coaching or consulting or something like that. Can you explain more about that? And I'll literally tell them, like, well, I don't do that on these interviews. I have another interview coming up, which I usually do. It's not just something I'm telling them. So I just say, let's book another call next week and we'll talk about it then. But then when we book that call, we both are coming into that call knowing that this is now an opportunity. This is a sales context. This is a prospecting context. You're jumping on this call because you want to know more about my professional services. And at that point, you've given me the green light to be the sales guy again, rather than being like the host or the interviewer. So I even like to switch the context so that we both know, we both have an understanding. Like when we get into the conversation next time, I'm going to try to sell you something. And, if it's a good fit, I hope that you're the type of person that's going to say yes at that time.
I love that. And I love how that was a prime example of how you naturally worked in what you do for a living as well, without it coming off as you were doing some sort of a promotional sales pitch. So that's perfect example for people listening on how you can still talk about what you do without it being like, here's what I do. So.
Oh, totally. Yeah. That happened with a podcast coaching client recently. I had him on an interview, and I asked him on the interview if he had a podcast, because his business was just like, I was like, bro, like, I was like, if you're interested, we should talk about this later. Okay. Because like the way that your business is set up, it blows my mind that you do not have a podcast yet, because would be an amazing thing for you. But anyway, let's get back into the conversation. And we just talked regularly. And then at the end, he brought it back up and asked if we could jump on a call. And so we jumped on a call and he bought the services, and now they're launching a podcast. It's not like you have to avoid talking about what you do like it's the plague. You know what I mean? Like it just means that you're not, like, the purpose of this call is not to sell them something. It's just to have the conversation like you originally told them you were going to do. So just do that.
Yeah, I love that. I watch your YouTube instead of listening. I like the visual side of things, so I watch a lot of your YouTube. But I guess what's your most favorite thing that you're working on right now?
Right now, we're working on a new podcast, a new show. It's more built for YouTube, because we've never really done much YouTube, and I appreciate you watching our stuff on YouTube. I try to tell people to go to YouTube now because we've been playing catch up on YouTube for the last couple of years. Because it sounds weird to say it now, but when I started my podcasting and YouTube were two completely separate islands that did not touch each other. It was like you're either going to be a podcaster or you're going to be a YouTuber. And I weighed both the options when I was first starting. I was like, I would rather be a podcaster. So much so that my first 150 interviews I did on Skype audio only calls. Like we didn't even capture video. It was just audio. Because that's what having a podcast was. It was like a radio show online. You know what I mean? Now it's you can't even mention podcast without thinking about YouTube. YouTube is the number one consumption platform for podcasting. So you have to get into that space. So like I said, we were just playing catch up because we ignored YouTube for so long, because we're like, no, we're podcasters. We're pure podcasters and whatever. And ignored the trend for far longer than I cared to admit. And so this new show that we're trying to build is more like a YouTube centric like a YouTube show, that will also probably release the audio, as well, of course, but, the YouTube is what we're really focused on. So it's called Dinner Party, and we invited out 5 guests at once, and we have dinner, and it's sort of like a dinner party, for the purpose of encouraging other people to host their own dinner parties and have their friends over and have more in-person connection. But then also it happens to prompt some pretty good panel-like conversation, with some incredible people if you can put them in the room. So our first episode is in post-production right now, and we will probably be releasing it here in the next 4 to 6 weeks, somewhere in there. But yeah, we got a great group of guests for that dinner party. And so, yeah, we cost us a pretty penny to put it together, but I'm pretty proud of it so far. And hope that it ends up doing really well once we decide to release it.
Oh, that sounds neat. I like that. Do you go to the same restaurant each time, or where do you actually go for the dinner?
We rented an event venue this time and brought food in, so that we could control the audio and video and all that kind of stuff. So it was a little bit easier that way.
There's a lot to orchestrate for sure. Fun fact, I started my first podcast a little over 10 years ago, and it was live. We had a producer, and it was live, and it was, I don't even remember the platform that we hosted it on, but you're right. I didn't even think about YouTube back then. Mm-hmm. And I too have neglected my YouTube until recently. And I was like, I should probably get on this YouTube thing.
Yeah, exactly. You got, I mean, you have to, honestly, like even if your video at this point, even if your video quality is like not good and you have no idea what you're doing and it's not highly edited in post production and stuff, it's still worth putting your content on YouTube if you can afford to do it, just because of AEO, AI optimization. Because so many LLMs pull data from YouTube videos. So if you're just releasing it on RSS feeds, there's actually not a lot of searchability on AI platforms from just the audio feeds. They're mostly going to be using and indexing YouTube content. That's as of now. I am, that could change literally tomorrow. But yeah, so you got to kind of you got to kind of just throw it out there. And like I said, even if it's not optimized, even if it only gets 12 views, just put it there, because you never know who's going to be using ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that to be searching for something that you do. And if you have a ton of content to index on those platforms, you're more likely to be shown to somebody, like some user that's searching for something that you do.
Yeah, 100%. And, I always tell our clients too, like, just creating the video itself gives you tons of opportunities for additional content outside of that podcast episode. It could be a pull out quotation, all the snippets, of course, that everybody does. Like, if you're going to sit down and talk for 45 minutes to an hour, you can also use it for other things than that.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a content engine. You know what I mean? Everybody, especially if you're a business owner, you are pulled in every direction. You can look online today at your algorithm and tomorrow at your algorithm, and between those 2 days, you can get 18 different things that all these creators or business owners are telling you have to do in 2026 if you're going to be a business owner. And so it's just like you get pulled in so many directions. And I think content is something that's very important, and it seems crazy to me that you're not doing it just because it's completely free advertising, which is something that people would have killed for a couple of decades ago. So I think you do have to do something. But the reason why I like podcasting as the main engine behind your content, if you are an entrepreneur versus all these other different forms, is what you just mentioned, where you can record one piece of content for an hour, whether it's you talking to a camera or it's you and your whatever COO or CFO or employee, somebody in your team, and you're doing like a co-host producer style hour, or it's you and a guest talking for an hour. It's one episode, and you created that one episode, one a week, and then you just go, that's what I got to do. 4 episodes a month. That's it. By the way, you can do all 4 of those episodes in a single day, in one afternoon, and have your entire month of podcast content done and ready to go. If you have 4 hours of content, the volume of clips that you can pull from that, the volume of tweets that you can pull from that, the volume of blog posts and newsletters and LinkedIn posts, and every piece of content can be completely extracted from this hour-long thing without you having to sit down in front of a camera and go, here's 3 things about marketing that everybody should know, or whatever. You know what I mean? Because like, if you're an entrepreneur, most of the time you're not a creator. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's creators, then there's entrepreneurs, then there's sort of like creative entrepreneurs, and then there's like entrepreneurial creators. And so like, wherever you exist in this matrix, have the self-awareness to understand that, like, okay, I don't like talking directly to a camera and coming up with 3 tips and scripting out this thing and reading off a teleprompter. I just don't like doing that. But, having an hour-long conversation with somebody I respect and admire, I enjoy doing that. That's fun. And so do the thing that's fun. Do the thing that's like, what if this were fun? What if this were easy? What would it look like? It's probably more similar to doing a long form podcast, which will create better fans along the way, ultimately, because it's long form and not just short form. I think short form creators struggle to monetize to the same degree that long form creators do, even with just a fraction of the audience. So it's a fantastic way to check off all of those boxes in 4 hours a month and then just be done. You know what I mean? You're going to have a little bit of expenses expenses on top of that, of course. If you want somebody to go through and pull clips and post them and things like that, if you're not going to be doing all of that yourself, then you're going to have some added expense there. But again, it's all marketing for your stuff, and it's only going to be helpful for you long term. So yeah, it's a great engine, just a distribution engine.
Yeah, 100%. I even took my transcripts from the last, I think, 40 episodes or so, and I put it into Claude and told Claude to kind of pull out some, what are some things that I often say over and over, some of my core themes that maybe I'm not aware that I talk about or things like that. And it was pretty interesting to see what it pulled up and just the ideas that it, could spark in you. And you said, again, with the fun thing, I've heard you say, how can this be more fun? Or I don't want to do this if it's not fun. Are you teaching that lesson to your daughters?
Yes, I have a one daughter, one son, and
Okay. Sorry, I was thinking it was $2.
No, you're good. You're good. What I find is that this is sort of meta, but what I find is that I did not have to teach my kids to have fun. My kids had to teach me to have fun. You know what I'm saying? It's something you don't have, they just innate in them. That's like it's their constant thought on every second of the day is having fun and playing and engaging in things that are fun for them. Regardless of their utility or lack thereof, you know what I mean? They're just trying to have fun. So I think having kids, more like it was sort of the opposite. It wasn't something I had to teach them. It's something that I looked at them and go like, man, where do you lose that? You know what I mean? Where do you lose that desire to just have a good time and have fun? Now it's obviously different from like pleasure seeking and hedonism, and that can pull you down a dark path relatively soon, especially if you have nothing tethering you to reality as a full grown adult and you have access to whatever you want to do. So there's a limit to that. But in terms of the thing that I'm doing with the majority of my waking hours, I would prefer that thing to give me more fun and fulfillment because it's the thing that I'm going to do with the majority of my time. So I would rather sacrifice financially in order to pursue something that I perceive as being more fun because, having a rich soul is equally as or more important than having a rich bank account. Now, there are and I've kind of come to the conclusion recently that it's more like seasons in life. Life presents you seasons, and some seasons are sometimes more about fun and some seasons are more about building your financial future because you can't escape that. And I find that I have more fun when I feel better financially. The two are often correlated to some degree, but yeah, I never, to answer your question, never something I had to teach my kids, something they taught me.
Yeah, you're right there about the seasons too. And one of our clients, they say one for the money, two for the soul.
Yeah, I like that.
So, but yeah, you're right. Oftentimes it is easier to have fun when you also have money and you're not worried about that for sure.
Totally.
And, one of our twins is, she still lives with us and she most likely always will. And even though she's 27 now, because she is missing parts of her brain. And she has taught us to continue to have fun. And, I can still be silly with her and, do my goofy dances or talk to my plants like an idiot, and it's been neat to kind of see how she kind of instigates that, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, that old saying, you don't grow older, or you grow older because you stop having fun. You don't stop having fun because you grow older, or something like that. That having kids definitely makes you realize that. Like I said, because it's just constant for them. There's just the only thing that they're thinking about basically all day. It's like, what's the next thing that we're going to do that's awesome and fun and that's new and exciting and whatever. And as adults, you just kind of get settled into this, necessary milieu that negates your desire to have fun in a lot of ways. And like I said, sometimes seasons of life call for that. But if you don't balance that with another season that is calling for the opposite, then I think that's how you end up with a lot of money and not a great life.
What's your advice for someone who's stuck in that season and can't seem to get themselves out?
Do the math. What do you really need now? What Are you pursuing this because you're still, $25,000 in credit card debt and you don't have enough money at the end of the month to pay your bills? Like that, being in that state it's really difficult to have fun. You're in this constant state of just like the cortisol levels in your blood never seem to decrease. They almost always seem to increase. And so, if you're in that season, you got to just, batten down the hatches and keep going in that season until you can get yourself in a position to be able to take a breath and then to allow yourself the permission to be able to go have some fun for a little bit. And then if you're in that season, find little things that you can do. It doesn't always have to be a trip to Bora Bora to have fun. You know what I mean? Like it can just be a night where you go to the driving range because you like playing golf. You don't have time to get a full round in, but you want to go hit a few golf balls, or it's having a burger and a beer with your friends on Friday night, or you have a standing dinner and games invitation to your friends once a month. Like you can find ways to insert fun during those busy seasons when you have to be in this focus mode. But then if you're in a position where you're like the opposite of that, and you just have been 12 years head down, busting your ass, working because maybe you came from no money and you have this burning desire inside of you to never know what it feels like to have to worry about turning off the lights or, not using the AC in the summer or things like that. And you're sort of running away from that, then, like I said, do the math. Because if you've been in that position for a long time, you're probably doing a lot better than you think that you're doing. And I'm not trying to take away anybody's ambition and say that you should not try to continue to get better and pursue higher and higher goals or whatever. But yeah, do the math and figure out like maybe it would be good for me to take a little sabbatical, or maybe it would be good for me to take a little bit of time off or engage back with something that I used to have fun with growing up. But you can do that without sacrificing everything else. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're in the middle of that position, do the math, figure out what it would look like if you took a little bit of time off, and then take account, quote unquote, do the math on the social side, on the fun side. Like when was the last time you laughed so hard that you couldn't breathe? Like when was the last time that you enjoyed a night out with your friends without thinking about the consequences tomorrow? When was the last time that you just spent an evening with your family playing games and talking to your kids about their day? And if the answer to that is a really long time, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're eventually probably going to be in some form of a regretful situation. And I don't really love the word regret because I don't find much use or value to it. But I also find that it's a core driver for me to like avoid regret. And I've never met anybody who regretted spending more time with people that they love. And I have met people who've regretted spending more time working and making more money. So, and this is coming from a guy who runs a show called Travis Makes Money. So like I understand the importance of money. And I think that people are wildly underestimating in general the amount of money that they're going to need to live the life that they really want to live. And that you should, button things up every once in a while and go in focus mode and not see the inside of a restaurant unless you're working there, type of a thing. Like sometimes it calls for that. Like if you put yourself in a bad position, you're in a ton of debt and it's going to take 15 years for you to get out of this mess if you do it the normal way, or it could take 3 years if you just focus mode. You know what I mean? Like probably better to do that for this period of life and set yourself up for the next phase, so that you don't have to do this thing again, So it's a very nuanced answer for anybody who's listening, because it also depends. Like, do you love the thing that you do? Do you get to engage in having fun in the hustle? Because that's why I mentioned that earlier about like, is this fun? Or like, how could I create content if it were really fun and exciting? That's why I do the podcast still, because it just is the thing that I know that I need to create content, and that's the way that I like to do it the best. So why would I go switch to something that might work better but be something that I hate or that I begrudge or that I look at as a time suck, and I never want to do it. So there's a lot of nuance there based on like, what do you do for a living? Do you have kids? How old are you? What are you know? How much money do you have in retirement? Are you in debt? Like, there's a lot of different things that I think should be taken into account before you make a drastic decision regarding your time allocation. But my gut tells me that probably more people need the reminder that sometimes it's time to work rather than the opposite of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I love that. Um, well, what is the one thing that you're always like, I want to make sure this is the message that I share when I'm on a podcast?
Don't forget about your friends. There was a moment where, like, pursuing the professional network, I neglected a lot of my closest friendships because in my mind it was like, well, these friendships are great, but they're not as valuable as going to this next event or meeting this person or talking to this other person who's got this massive business or whatever. And I prioritized a lot of other people over my personal friendships. And it took a couple extenuating circumstances in my personal life before it kind of kicked me out of that mode and reminded me that some of the most important things some of the most important relationships in your life are going to be your close friends, and that they're really difficult as an adult to maintain. And so if you do not put some form of like purposeful effort into maintaining those friendships, then at some point you're going to wake up and realize you don't have any friends. And I think that's one core reason for the loneliness epidemic. Is that it's the easy one to keep knocking down the totem pole. You know what I mean? Like, when you're growing up, it's all about your friends. Everything's about your friends, doing stuff with your friends, even in college. Like, it's a lot about, your friends and hanging out with your friend group. Your friends are your family type of thing. And you grow up and you get a spouse, and then your spouse takes number one priority in terms of your relationships, and they should. So your friends get knocked down, and then you have a career. Then you're spending the majority of your waking time working on your career. So your friends take another step down the totem pole, and then you have kids. And then your kids move up right under your spouse and above your career and above your friends. And again, they should. They're your kids. You know what I mean? You should be spending time with them and prioritizing them in your life. But that's my point: is that it's so easy just to keep kicking the friendship priority down the totem pole. And then, like I said, you wake up in 20 years and you might have a good career and you might have a good relationship with your spouse, but your kids are gone and they're out of the house. And now it's basically just you, a couple work people that you see at work, and your friend and your spouse, and you don't have that, those really close friendships with people. And I think that's a travesty. I think that would be something that I would come to regret later on. I think a lot of people are sort of feeling that anymore. And it's like, I love my wife and we get along great, and she is my best friend in terms of like the volume of time we spend together, and I love spending time with her. It's great, but I also need time with my boys. You know what I mean? And she needs time with her girls. You know what I mean? It's like those types of relationships give you something that your spouse cannot give you, and you need both of them to have like a well-rounded relationship profile, if you will. So don't neglect your friendships in pursuit of success. Don't neglect your friendships in pursuit of a strong relationship with your spouse. The nice thing about them is they don't require as much investment as like your spouse or your kids or something like that, but they do require some. So if you're sitting there realizing that it's been 4 years since you've hung out with your friends for an extended period of time, be the person to lead the way. And I tell people this all the time: put something on your calendar in 3 years from now. It doesn't even have to be like tomorrow. I understand everybody's grown up and everybody's got kids and a family, everybody's got careers and everybody's busy. Well, there's nothing on the calendar in 3 years from now. You know what I mean? Like, I guarantee you're going to find that all 5 of you will have a 5-day period of time in 3 years that you can put on the calendar and say, we are all going to freaking whatever, Denver. I don't care. The place, it doesn't matter. Like I said, it doesn't have to be Tahiti. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's something that you can put on the calendar to look forward to. It engages your friend group again. You can talk about it in a group chat. It's something to throw, golf course green fees in there, or throw different activities in there, or talk about what you're going to do. It's just something to immediately engage with you and your friends again. And so, yeah, don't neglect your friendships.
I love that. Well, Travis, where can people watch your shows and listen to your podcast?
Yeah. So Travis Makes Money is my business show, if that's not completely obvious. And I know earlier I said that we put everything on YouTube, but we actually don't release that one on YouTube simply because we release 90 episodes a month on that show. And so the cost to produce the video side for YouTube would be just too much. And so we just have decided to keep that one audio only for now. I did talk to my producer last week though, and I was like, hey, we should start releasing sort of like best of catalog on YouTube. So we can just do like daily releases instead of 3 times daily or something, and just have like 5-6 days a week on YouTube instead of, whatever, 21 a week on audio like we do now. So I do expect that we will be putting some of that on YouTube. But anyway, Travis Makes Money is the business podcast. Travis Makes Friends is the whatever I want podcast. It's still always with an education leaning. So even when I have like a comedian on, or, I've had a couple of the Impractical Jokers from True TV on, and things like that, we still find some way to wrap in, like, what did you do during this time period? Or what was your mindset going into this deal negotiation? Or how did you even pitch this television show to this network? So we still find a lot of education paths even in those conversations. And then we talk to psychologists or philosophers or Navy SEALs and fighter pilots and athletes and basically whoever I find interesting. It's a way for me to scratch my curiosity itch publicly, essentially. And so that's the Travis Makes Friends podcast, which we do also release on YouTube.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today. Time flew by. So I'm glad that we got to connect and that we were able to share some of your story as well.
Appreciate it, Chrissy. Thanks so much for having me on.